Hey guys, welcome to the IHTHT podcast. Today I have with me Blair Kim, fellow podcaster. She's a host of the When I Grow Up podcast. And our families are really good friends, but randomly got a text message from her saying she wanted to share about postpartum depression she had been struggling with for the last half a decade. Really took me by surprise, but I think this conversation shed a lot of light into what that can look like for a lot of different people and the things that she did to kind of get out of that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. What's up, Blair? How are you?
Sorry, I'm just sipping my tea. How am I?
Yes.
I'm great.
Great. Here, I'm gonna just do this
Okay.
just so.
Okay.
Yeah. Just want to make
How
sure
are
that
you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah?
I'm great. Back into podcasting after a while.
I like your new studio.
Thank
here.
you. Yeah.
It's
New
nice.
house.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's a mosquito over there. Let me
Is there?
sorry. Let me just.
Wow, that's really big.
Yeah. Just stay there real quick. This can be all part of the podcast.
But you know, those mosquitoes I heard don't bite. Is that true? I don't know if that's true. Let's not find out, I guess.
Probably don't.
Perks of living in Georgia.
Okay.
Nice. If anyone wants to know, David Shing is capable of killing bugs quite well.
You know what's funny? We couldn't use the vacuum for like a week
Why?
because there was like huge cockroach that we found in the living room, and like I can't do squishy, like crunchy, you know.
Yeah.
So I just sucked it up into the vacuum.
Oh my gosh.
Just kind of closed it and just left it there. And I was like, we have to wait until it dies, until we can like empty it out. So it was just sitting there.
And they don't die,
They're very like resourceful.
right? Like, I mean, I heard like, don't they survive like nuclear
Yeah.
bombs and stuff?
Yeah.
That's really
They
gross.
say that if there's a nuclear war, cockroaches are the most likely to survive.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but okay, but I've never done that, the vacuum thing.
Yeah. I think that would be a good like product. Bug catching.
I'm sure they have it.
I'm sure, but I couldn't find any good ones. Yeah. So I just used my vacuum. But anyways, there's a reason we met today, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
It was kind of my prompting, but welcome back.
No, thank you.
I really do actually just want to know how you're doing, but since I'm here, I guess I will talk about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I contacted you recently in the new year, and I felt like, you know, it would be good to have a conversation about how I've been doing. I feel like, you know, you're a really good person that listens well, and, you know, everyone loves that. I hope they hear this platform. No, I truly mean that, because I feel like every guest I've ever talked to that's come on your podcast, like, we all say the same thing. Man, David is such a great facilitator. He's the best host. And so me personally, I there's a big piece of my life where I feel like, yeah, I should talk about, but I want to talk about. And as an extroverted processor, I'd love to process it with you.
Sure.
I've thought about talking about it on my own podcast, but it just, you know, it's a different kind of atmosphere and vibe.
The When I Grow Up podcast.
Yes.
Because that one is more geared towards like finding out about careers.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, you know, and it's really cool to be able to hear other people's journeys as well. But it's just, you know, different sharing my own, my personal life. But the reason I wanted to talk to you was, I, in the new year, have experienced a humongous, like, shift in my life. And so I'm here today to talk about my postpartum experience.
Yeah. And just to level set, your kids are 5 and 4?
6 and 4.
6 and 4.
I know, so crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 4 years is not a long time, but it's also a very long time.
Yes.
So,
yes.
like, So really all I know about what you're about to share is that like single text that you sent me. Obviously, I
What did I
really
say?
want.
I don't remember what I
It
said.
was literally just, hey, like you were talking about postpartum depression
Yes.
and how you feel like you've been going through it for the last like 6 years.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've never been diagnosed, like, with anything. It's just what I experienced. And I feel like I should disclaim some things before I
Sure.
share. First thing is, everyone is different. Like, everyone's postpartum experience is so different than someone else's, but also could be the same. And so the reason I want to share is because I don't think people talk about it enough, or at least I didn't in the thick of it. And also, like, I don't think I can, like, call it depression because, again, it's not like I was ever diagnosed. I never saw a professional to help me or anything like that. I've never talked to anyone professionally either. But I know that what I felt was very real. And I also know that there are many people that have been diagnosed with postpartum depression, and I don't take that lightly. And I also don't want to compare,
Right.
myself to people that have been clinically diagnosed with it, because everything is like such a different scale from everybody else. And I don't, man, to be honest, David, we pushed this interview back,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and after we did that, I was like, should I not share this? Like, maybe it's better that I don't.
So is the fear that you are gonna misrepresent what this is, or
There's that, and also, like, it's just like fear in general, right? Of people, like, feeling a certain way about what I'm talking about my own experience.
right?
And also, like, just it's very personal to me. But
So is it also like a fear of being vulnerable kind of thing too?
I guess, like, because this is, like, so real.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm an honest person, but this is like terrible person. Like,
No, but I think that's why we should have the conversation even more, right? Because, well, first, your fear of misrepresenting this postpartum depression, I get it. Like, if like I'm depressed and I kind of go around saying, oh, I'm depressed, but like I'm not really diagnosed. And there are other people who like literally have like, I don't know, like suicidal thoughts all the time.
yes.
Like yeah, sure, I don't want to take it lightly, but I think that fear also is probably what stops a lot of people from talking about it.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think in just that one point alone, it's important to share, but also the fact that it is really personal to you and vulnerable, like you feel vulnerable sharing it. I think there is something in the process of talking about it. I think maybe it'll like kind of feel like a load off your shoulders, just kind of getting it out there. So I know we're already here, so I know you're gonna do it.
Yeah,
But
I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna further encourage you to be bold about it, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna miss my opportunity. Yeah. So where should I start?
So can we start kind of? I'm interested to hear about this kind of backwards, right? So
Okay.
from the moment you realized, oh, this might be postpartum depression, to kind of how you recognized it as such as you kind of like mentally traveled back in time.
Okay.
So what was there an event that triggered like, oh shoot, this might be postpartum depression, or were you kind of just contemplating life and then just hit you?
Okay, so, like, I don't know if there were, maybe there was an event, but literally since the start of 2023, I feel like, I mean, visually the image would be like there was something covering my eyes and it's just been lifted. And in the change of, like, attitude and behavior, I've begun to reflect on the last 6 years of my life and have shown myself grace, right? For the things that have happened or how I've felt. When I talk to people, like close friends about it now, I look back and I said, like, I think most of the time I just for 6 years have felt really melancholy. Like I feel just like nothing, or like really don't want to do anything, but my personality, right, is like just soldiering through. So even that, right, it's like I think everyone's personality is different too. How you handle situations is different. But I recognize that. I look back on the last 6 years and I recognize that I was just kind of doing what I was supposed to do, kept going. I wasn't pretending, but it was just like blah all the time. Like, just like, I'm here, so I'll just do it. But
Right.
David, like, if you knew me before I had kids, like, I was not like that. And again, today, I finally feel like what I did before having children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So-
yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say something?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Because from the moment you recognize that, the event of like your eyes feeling like it's being opened, how long did it take for you to like come back to being normal? Like, was it immediate?
Immediate.
Wow. So do you think the fact that you didn't recognize it as potentially postpartum depression is kind of what kept you in it?
Possibly. Possibly. I will say, like, I can't, again, every time I come on here, I feel like I have to say this, but yeah, me personally, I cannot, like, separate who I am with my faith.
Yeah.
And it was, for me, recognizing my identity as a beloved of Jesus Christ, and really accepting that, right? It's like, oh, who am I? I'm none of these things. And first and foremost, I'm a daughter of Christ. And like, I've been a Christian, I don't even know how long now. And to really own that, I want to say, we're turning 35 soon. Like, it's like, I'm a children's pastor.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just being honest here. Like, it, for me to fully embrace, oh, God not just likes me, or not just loves me, but he likes me, has been like such a huge revelation in the last like 2.5 months. And honestly, yeah, parts of me feel embarrassed to say that just because of, just calling myself a Christian.
Yeah.
But it's so freeing.
Yeah.
It's been so freeing. And so I think that was really the huge event that happened, where 2022, some things happened in my life where I started to question who I was as a person. Like, I think people, okay, I'll just be honest then. People approached me in my life, that people that know me and are my friends, right? And they started to question things about my personality. And in being confronted with those things, I mean, it was painful, like,
Sure.
to just like look at myself, people not being like satisfied with who I am. I'm like, what is that, right? Like, okay, if they're not happy with who I am, then what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I thought I was just being myself, right? But if being myself is not good enough for the people that I call my friends, then are they really my friends?
Sure.
Right? Those kinds of things were happening in my life, where I had to really reflect on who I am as a person. And in going through all of that, and at the end of the year, everything just kind of coming together, and the revelation from God of my own life that like, hey, like you don't have to be, I don't want to say ashamed. It was more like I just didn't know I didn't like who I was. And then when I realized, oh, God likes me, like, and it's different, right? Like when we have kids, like, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like, we love our kids, but there are days we don't like them.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And I didn't know that I felt that's how God saw me. Right? I didn't know I needed to hear, oh, Blair, like God doesn't just love you. He actually really likes you. And yeah, again, that was when the veil came off my eyes and I really awoke to the truth that who I am is who God made me.
Wow. So it sounds like the big kind of event that happened was this confrontation that happened with your friends. And in processing that, is that when you realized, so did you recognize that you might have postpartum depression because you were examining who you were as a person and recognizing that there was something different? Or was it kind of separate from
Yes, I think part of it was that because what I was being confronted with, I understood why they were saying the things that they were saying because I wouldn't like that either in another person, I think. But, it started to become this like, well, why don't they understand that I am having a difficult time? Right?
Yeah.
And then I started, well, why am I having a difficult time? And yeah, and then it was like, oh, because I literally am just doing my best.
All right.
Right? Getting up, making sure the kids are fed and going places, meeting people, socializing. These are all just things people do, but I was doing them because I knew that I had to do them, not because I wanted to do them.
Right.
And so when people were upset with me for the things that I was doing, it was like, well, I thought you guys were my friends, so why don't you understand what I'm going through? But I wasn't talking. I mean, you don't like go. I mean, not you don't go, but like, I started to ask myself, why didn't I talk about it? Like, why didn't I tell my friends, oh, this is how I'm feeling. Please understand where I'm coming from. But then you don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about like how you're feeling, because there's nothing to really talk about.
Yep.
Do you get what I'm saying?
No, for sure.
Yeah, like there's nothing to actually talk about other than, well, I mean, life goes on. I still have to take care of my children and my family. I still have to go to work every day. It doesn't change anything. So you just keep going.
You know why I think it's harder to talk about it is because if you tell somebody, like, I feel weird, like I feel like depressed a little bit, the immediate question is going to be, oh, why do you feel that way? And if you don't know that why, then it's so hard to like have that conversation.
Right.
Because like you ask yourself like, oh, why am I feeling this way? Oh, there's no reason. So let's just power through this, like soldier on, like you were talking about.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And then, my friends too, I have a few that had kids at the same time as I did. And yeah, again, we don't want to talk about those things.
Yeah.
Like, and, I can give you examples of things that have happened, where I can recall and I know exactly what was going on. Like, I look back, I'm like, wow, who was that person?
Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, no, I don't mind. I've been thinking about it, in preparation for this moment. But David, I do think I should go back to the beginning, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
So there were a lot of things that I think led up to even just how I was feeling post baby. I mean, but with my first child, I was one of like the first people out of my group of friends to get pregnant. Uh, and I have always, that's nothing. I've always wanted to be a mom, right? Like I remember I was working my job out of college, and people would ask me like, "Oh, so like, are you gonna work hard to get to the top of your career?" And I'm like, I mean, I guess, but at the time my career required me to travel a lot, and I would tell them, actually, like, I'm just gonna be here for a season. I actually just want to be a mom when I grow up, And so people respected that, thankfully the people I worked with. But yeah, so it was like everything I wanted was that. And then I got pregnant. I was coaching at the time. I was a figure skating coach at the time, and yeah, like I think I was like, oh, not just that. I wasn't just coaching. I was actually starting a new project with a friend. You've had him on your podcast before with EJ.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I remember this.
And it was like just like, it was, long story short, there was an empty space, and then me and EJ were trying to do something for the community, right? So a lot of things were happening. I had my hands in different places, and David, I felt really good. I felt purposeful. I felt like God was using me. I felt like I had a voice, right? All these things. And then I got pregnant, and the pregnancy physically like laid me out flat, literally. Like I could not get out of bed physically. And for those that don't know, it's just like morning sickness was, I don't even know if you can call it that. It was just sickness. Like and again, other people experience different things. Not everyone goes through this. And I really do want to empathize, like, because I do have a lot of friends that have trouble getting pregnant. And so I don't want to sound ungrateful, but this was just my experience. Yeah. So I literally physically could not sit up without throwing up.
Yeah.
Like my hands are sweating right now, even thinking about it. That I think it was like week 9 or 10 when it was at its peak, where David had to go to E2, the summer retreat.
Oh, right.
So
Empower
he was,
and equip. Or
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
And so we had a roommate at the time, my best friend, who's also been on your podcast, Christina Martinez. She was staying with us for like, I think only a couple months, but and David could not, not go to this retreat. So he was gone for 3 or 4 days. I did not get out of bed for like, I think 6 days or 6 or 7 days, because every time I moved, drank water, my friend Christina tried to take care of me and try to get me to eat stuff. Like every time I would just smell something, it would be like violent throwing up. Not just it was like violently throwing up, right? And so disgusting. Like I didn't know, so I didn't shower either. I just laid there in bed. I didn't know like what happens if you don't shower for that long, but literally like dead skin just like starts falling off.
Wow.
It's so disgusting. I remember finally being able to like crawl to the shower to bathe, and just like, oh man, getting emotional. Just thinking, what the crap is this? Like what the F is going on?
Yeah.
Because I can't do this. And it was like that for me for almost 7 months.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was mad. I was like mad at God. I didn't even talk to him. I remember there were not many thoughts at all. Not even about Eli. Like, because I was just trying to survive, right? Like David, like there was one night it was so bad that I was like just weeping, and David took a video of me and I'm talking to myself and I'm like in the video I say, Blair, if you ever think about having children again, remember this moment. Like think about it again, right?
Yeah.
And I was so sick that like, yeah, and then doctors were like, "Oh yes, like it's normal to have morning sickness." So they would prescribe me things, and honestly, I thought it wasn't helping, the medicine that they would prescribe me, but turns out it was. Because, like, I was taking the medicine and I was still throwing up. I stopped taking the medicine because I kept throwing up anyways, but it was actually worse. So I was like,
So it
okay.
did help.
Yeah, it did help, right? And so, anyways, it was that for 7 months. By month 8, I finally was like, okay, like, I can finally, like, think a little bit and move around, go see people. I mean, I remember people were like, "Is Blair alive?" Like,
No, like truly, I most of my friends who are mothers, I can picture them pregnant. I can't picture you pregnant. I literally, I don't think I saw you the entire 9 months for both pregnancies.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, it was pretty awful. And so thankfully, my delivery was very smooth. I chose to get an epidural, and everything was fine with Eli's delivery. After that, no, when I saw Eli, it wasn't instantaneous love for me. It's not like I just, he came out and I held him and I was like, I'm so in love with you. It wasn't like that for me. Again, it's different for everybody, but instinctually, yes. Did I feel the need to take care of him and like want to protect him? Of course. But yeah, I mean, it that I my so David and I, our parents don't live here. My parents live in California. His parents live in Brazil. Of course, they were here the first month or two to help us out. And after that, for me, it was better. I was able to find a rhythm on my own. I preferred it. However, looking back, and again, it's nobody's fault. I think it did contribute, right? The lack of support, like that kind of family support, did contribute to whatever whatever I was feeling during that time. But I didn't know it then, and I wouldn't take it back either.
Sure.
Right? Like I wouldn't take it back. It's just looking back on it, I'm like, oh, maybe it probably most likely contributed, right, to whatever I was going through in that first year. I'm sure because you're a parent yourself, like the first year is grueling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, until you have kids, you don't really know. And on top of that, no one really told me. And then if they did, before having my own kid, I don't think I really cared. Right? Like, 관심 없는 거지. Like, it's like, doesn't apply to you. So you don't really care. And so, yeah, I mean, I like to think I handled it well, but I had the luxury of being a stay-at-home mom, but David would go to work and come back and help me, yes, but it's just different.
Sure.
And going back to like examples that you were asking for, of like specific incidents that would happen where I felt kind of crazy. It was a lot of that, right? It was a lot of like comparison, right? Like so unhealthy, like so toxic. Things like, I mean, what do you do all day? Right? Like, you get to go to work and I'm stuck here with the baby. Who is like literally, you know, needing me 24/7.
Yeah.
And then like I can't even leave because you can't feed the baby. Like I'm breastfeeding. And again, none of it was David's fault, but I just made it David's fault, right? I remember there were times where we would fight. I would fight him on those kind of things. Like, I mean, okay, this one situation, I don't even remember what it is I brought up to fight about, right? I was always just picking a fight with him. And David, you know, how can he not like be mad? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not fair for him either. He's a new dad. He's just doing his best. Without him, I cannot eat. Like, we don't have food to eat. You know what I mean? Like, I literally cannot live without my husband working, yet I'm mad for him going to work, right? Like, just crazy, like, just not things that don't make any sense, right? It's not logical at all. But I remember, like, I was like so frustrated and mad. I like, the thought that crossed my mind was like, oh, I don't even want to sleep in the same room with him. And I almost felt this like, well, I'm going to protect Eli from David.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right? Isn't that crazy? And so like, I was like, well, I can't leave the house is what I thought, right? I can't. And I'm telling you this, whatever we were fighting about, I don't even remember at this point. It wasn't a big deal. It was just me taking things to the extreme, right?
Yeah.
Me victimizing myself, right? And again, to be fair, you know, I think he could have handled things differently too, right?
Sure, yeah.
But again, we were just new to everything,
Yeah.
you know, and no one to talk to. And then on top of that, in David's defense too, like, how old was he? He's 30 now, 6 years ago.
24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Super young.
Yeah.
Like, just trying to figure out how to be an adult, right? We all are, and I'm mad at him for trying to do that, is basically.
And to be fair, also relatively new to the country.
Right.
Yeah.
So many things. Like,
Yeah.
and on top of that, like, I think 8 months in, we were trying to buy a new house. And if you ever bought a house, I don't know if you know how complicated it can be. You know, and he has a healthy amount of pride, you know, and it's not that he didn't want to ask for help. It's like, who do you ask? Right.
Yeah.
And things like that. It's just, I'm sure there were so many times he felt so alone, and I just made it worse, you know. But going back to that situation where I felt like I needed to protect Eli, right, my baby, I was like, well, this is my baby, right? Which is just not true. I remember leaving the room to go sleep in the guest room, and thankfully my husband is a man of character, and he came in and was like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? What am I doing? What are you doing? You know, and then, you know, thankfully we resolved whatever that was that night, and I got back in the room. But even in that, right, like, I just remember feeling so alone and so like right in that moment, but also feeling crazy. Like crazy as in like my emotions were just so extreme, and that my behavior was like really like unbelievable, if I'm honest.
Yeah. But like just hearing about the whole like from pregnancy till the birth, like I can I can't relate, but I can see why you would be in that position.
Thank you.
And no, because like from what I picked up, right? Like you went through this grueling pregnancy period for 7 months, right? And then you pop out the baby, and because like a lot of people, they're told like, oh, the moment you see your baby, you're gonna feel this instantaneous love connection, but like you said, it doesn't happen for all mothers.
Right.
So that doesn't happen, and then you get a little bit of support. I mean, a month for like taking care of a brand new human being, it's not that long, right? So you get a little bit of support, but then you're just kind of, it's just you and your husband and this new human being that
Right.
cannot do anything by itself. And you've stopped coaching.
Yeah.
The project with EJ stopped. Like you had all this purpose, but like now you're being kind of told that your only purpose is to protect this baby.
Yes.
And care for this baby, right?
Yes.
So I can see why you would be protective of Eli. Like when you're like upset with David and you're fighting him, I can see why you're saying, I got, it's like, it seems instinctual, and it seems like kind of a survival mechanism that seems normal, given like what you went through. Because and I imagine like when you're pregnant, I've never been, so I can't say, but I imagine when you're pregnant, you give birth and you're like, okay, like the hard part's over. But in reality, it's like, it's just going to get harder, you know, like physically, maybe like your body is not under that much like stress, but you're mentally, you're literally 24/7 having to make sure this kid stays alive.
Yeah.
And like, you're like running around trying to like entertain, educate, feed. Like truly people who haven't had kids, I'm sure you can't really appreciate like what you went through. And I honestly can't fully appreciate what you went through because I'm not a mother. I can only speak to what I've observed my wife going through.
Yeah.
So if we just hear the part of, oh, you fought with David and then suddenly you were like, I got to protect Eli from David, that can sound crazy. But I think for the whole picture, when we think about it, like really from your perspective, it's not like, I don't think it was anything that out of the realm of possibility, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And what you said actually clarifies a lot of things in my own mind right now too. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And thank you for knowing where I was going with that. Because yes, everything I did, I felt so, I don't want to say purposeless, but kind of, you know, and then again, people and me, and I'm like, oh, my new purpose is Eli and this baby, right? And it didn't feel comfortable, and am I good at this? Like and then you just start pouring everything into the baby because you don't know what else to do. And then those situations happen, right? And I don't want anyone to misunderstand. Like, there were so many good moments in that first year. It's just sometimes in that first year, the bad moments honestly outweighed the good moments for me many times. And physically, mentally, emotionally, it was just a lot. I do want to, like, just to give another example of like just my emotional extremes, like, and a lot of it was centered around David, poor guy. But he was the only person I saw.
Yeah.
You know, like, he's, you know, we're really involved in church ministry too, right? And so like Friday nights, like Friday night youth nights, I wouldn't see him at all, right? He wouldn't come home at all, and I would be like mad, like, oh my gosh, like, okay, it's great, just leave me here, you know? But obviously that's not what he was doing, right? And then I got like jealous almost of like, well, he gets to go to youth night and I just have to stay at home with the baby. And then you feel again like dumb because it's like, why do I not feel like I get to stay home with the baby? Okay, then why am I complaining? Oh my gosh, I'm complaining again. You know, it's like this cycle of like, does that make me a bad mom? I don't know. Like, and then your husband comes home from having a great and very like blessed time, and then I fight with him again, right? And then I remember one night he like wasn't saying anything because he didn't know what to say. And I just went to after the Eli went to sleep, I remember going to the bathroom and like David like sobbing, like just like from your bones, like just weeping uncontrollably because I literally felt like, oh, like no one in the world understands how I feel right now. Like, and not even my husband. But how could he?
Right.
You know, and again, it wasn't his fault. It just the emotional, I don't even, what do you call that? Just the emotional like hormones that I guess
Overcharged
that or something, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, again, I just like, okay, I don't want to talk about this with anybody. Why it's such a hassle to bring it up, and feeling kind of embarrassed about it. So anyways, a year goes by. Finally,
But sorry, before we move on, I do want to say when we gave birth to both our kids, one of the things the nurses like kind of like make sure you understand is if the mom feels sad, it's totally like it's even there are some moms who feel suicidal, and some who have like this sounds very gruesome, but like some think like, oh, I want to kill the baby. Like those levels of kind of what we perceive as irrational thoughts, right? They're like, that's like part of postpartum depression. Like that's not like you're not a bad person if you feel those things. It just means that you need to seek help and make sure that the baby's safe and things like that. But so all that to say,
they talked to you about that?
yeah.
No one talked to me about that.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Then that even more so would be like such a like because like you don't know why you're feeling these things,
Right.
yeah, because they were straight up like Shirley like, hey, like if you feel like they were like very nice about it. They used better terminology. I just can't remember what it is, but basically they were like, if you feel like you want to kill the baby, like just like call this number, or like make sure you give the baby to a trusted relative or your husband or somebody, and then seek help like via this avenue or channel.
I see.
Yeah. So all that to say, like everything you're going through, it doesn't sound like it's like a personal thing, right? I'm sure there are people who've gone through something similar, and in much like more irrational degrees, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like I want to use this moment to kind of give a shout out to all moms who like, you know, like it's like so much like physical change, and they told us like you can have those thoughts because of like chemical shifts in your brain now that you've given birth. So like all these hormones are like firing, and so yeah, like man, you not only have to go through like huge physical trauma, but now you're going through like mental changes.
Yeah.
And Korean fathers, actually, is it Korean moms who say this more? But like from like a lot of Korean people, Korean adults, I heard 아빠가 잘해야 돼. Like you're the fathers, you have to do well because like you can't even imagine what the mother's going through. So glad to hear that David, for the most part, did well.
No, yeah, he did great. Yeah.
But I'm sure. But then, yeah, if you guys were the first ones in your friend group to kind of go through this, like you have no one to talk to, and if especially the nurses didn't tell you about postpartum depression, then you just think like, oh, I'm just going crazy. Like you don't even know that there's a legitimate medical reason why this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and then I think like later too, like when my friends started getting pregnant, more of my friends started getting pregnant. I think looking back, even during my pregnancy, like people would kind of side comment to me because they would remember how sick I was, and they would be like, "How were you like not depressed?" But I didn't even know that I was, right? And because they were like, you just feel so like useless. Like I felt so useless. I would even say like in the first 6 months after having Eli too, and you're trying to like search for like, I don't know why I did this, but a different purpose other than being a mom. It kind of, my thoughts even went to like, oh, I'm just this vessel that feeds my child every day. Like, things like that. Like, but anyways,
I can relate. You know how I wrote those two books?
yeah.
I wrote those because I felt like it was like right before Azu was born. And I wrote it because I felt like my only purpose is to provide for the family. And like I felt like I needed some other like creative expression of my purpose before I'm locked into really just being provider. Did I talk to you about this?
No.
Yeah. It was like people were like, "Oh, great, you wrote a book." But
Yeah.
behind it all, it was a real like desperate clawing of like trying to like I guess rediscover like my other identity besides just someone who makes money.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can relate a little bit to like a much lesser degree.
No. Listen, dads have it completely different. And I've watched David go through his own sufferings too. But what was I saying?
Like you were like trying to find other like purposes.
Oh yes. But so after a year of Eli being alive, I started physically feeling better, back to myself. Mentally, I could like see through the fog a little bit better. Eli had been sleeping through the night at this point, so I was getting better sleep. And again, I know we're highlighting just the lows for me, but there were many highs throughout. It's such a special year. I remember just like even feeling like super mom, being like, oh yes, like I can do it all, like, and take care of my baby. And it was great. It was great. But again, there were just so many extremes. And after a year or two, I was feeling better physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, just starting to get my bearings again. It was, Eli was born December 27th in 2016. So, coming up on 1 year, it was literally like, entering a new year. I remember January 2017 coming up with the idea for When I Grow Up. And
Was that kind of your other purpose?
I didn't start it until later, but I had started thinking about it because I was like ready. I was ready to do something else, right? And so I even remember like I was like driving. I was listening to someone else's podcast. I think it was Chrissy Knuckles.
Okay.
And I thought, I like talking to people, and like just it kind of just went into this whole like, yeah, okay, if I did a podcast, what would I do, right? And I started talking with other people about it, and everyone seemed to really think it was a good idea. So I was like, okay, like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I got pregnant again.
By the way, I think we were all kind of surprised that you.
Yeah,
you
I
got
was
preg-
surprised too.
Oh, you.
No, I wasn't surprised. We were trying. We were open because I just didn't think. I just knew I'm the only child, so I just knew I wanted to have another one. So I didn't think about it. And man, David, this one was just as bad as the first one. Like, and it was so funny. Like, I didn't know I was pregnant, but I just had a feeling But I went, so and then I found out I was pregnant, and then David and I had to lead a college, I think it was college retreat in the mountains on the most windy road that you could ever imagine, right? And I got so sick on this ride that from that point on it was just downhill, right? Like I was literally in bed the whole weekend. Like the students had to watch Eli, and going back home, I was like regretting everything, just throwing up on the way. Like everything was like, just looked at David. I'm like, why did we do this again? But this time around, it only lasted, I think, I want to say 5 months. It's almost like my body, because I still had to take care of Eli, so it's almost like my body kind of knew, and it was used to maybe the first time getting pregnant, but it's still miserable, still just like wanting to throw up my guts, and yeah, like thankful that it was a girl.
Because you wanted both?
I wanted both, and I just felt like if it was a boy that I'd have to try again, and like just so many things. But at the same time, also very grateful that it happened so easily for us, and that the babies were healthy. So many things, right? As I feel like I grow older, just being exposed to more about pregnancy and life, and seeing my friends go through stuff that I know I'm so grateful for my situation, but again, it was just really tough. And then actually Zoe's delivery was like traumatizing. So this one was really quick. I went in, my water broke, but they said that I was still only 4.5 centimeters. They asked me to walk around the hospital. I did that. I went from 4.5 to 8.5 in like 30-40 minutes. Didn't like, I was screaming epidural. They're like, okay, if you can stay still, we'll give you the epidural. I'm gonna stay still, so just give it to me. I will say, like, 'cause I know you guys did everything naturally. Like, I don't know how you guys did that, but I've come to learn, like, if you prepare mentally beforehand, and it is a different situation. But me, I had always planned to get the epidural, so I was not prepared for anything. So I was like, and the pain with Eli was not as bad than with, I think just the jump from 4 to 8 was like crazy for me. So I was like screaming, and then I remember screaming to the nurse like, no one told me it was like this. And then I was like, it wasn't like this the first time, you know? And they're like, it's all right, like just breathe through it. And I was like cussing, and like, I'm just a dramatic person in general. But anyways, I managed to sit through the epidural. But then at that point, it was almost like I got it too late, because when it hit is when I had to push, and then I couldn't feel anything like at all. So because the drugs had hit, and at that point, Zoe had like, I guess she was stuck, and then they tried to use the vacuum to pull her out, but then what I learned later, I didn't know at the time, but I guess her heart had stopped beating. And then
And this was like much later, right?
What do you mean?
Like then you found out, like, wasn't it like you saw your doctor at like
crazy. Yes. So like, well, I mean, at the time, the doctor was just like, Blair, there's no time. We have to have an emergency C-section. They were like before the words even were coming out of her mouth, they're already like ripping cords from the walls. I felt like I watched Grey's Anatomy, so I felt like I was like in this Grey's Anatomy situation, and like they're like I'm like, where's David? They're yelling for David. He's supposed to come in, but then there's no time for him to change into his scrubs or whatever. And then like we get into the operation room, you know, they're counting 1, 2, 3 to lift me. Even all that was like just traumatizing. And and then on top of that, they give me anesthesia to have a emergency C-section to get Zoe out. And I'm throwing up from the anesthesia, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna throw up. So I'm like throwing up as they're like cutting me. And then David comes in, and I'm just looking at him like, what's going on? They get Zoe out, and she's crying. So I'm like, oh, maybe it's great. Like, everything's fine. And they tell me everything's fine. So, yeah, I did not think that situation was as serious as I later found out that it was. But after Zoe was born, my blood pressure was really low. So they couldn't get my blood pressure to rise. So like I couldn't, because every time I sat up, I would feel nauseous and want to throw up. So this is not a it's not a big deal, okay? It's just my personality and who I am. But like, yeah, so Zoe's first meal out of the womb was a bottle that David gave her, but it was just as a mom and knowing what had been going through for the last year and a half, almost 2 years at this point. I had my purpose is for my children and to feed them, and like I would keep sitting up to feed Zoe, and I kept wanting to throw up, and I was like, I can't do it. And so of course they were great. They're like, it's not a big deal, like David can feed her, she'll get skin to skin with David. I'm like so upset, right? And but you know, again, just trying to survive the moment. So I gave up. I 포기했지, you know, that situation. And then, but yes, the story is later, like during the pandemic, is at this point, Zoe's like 2. I find out, I run into my doctor that delivered Zoe, and she like remembers like me. It's been 2 years, like me. She remembers Zoe. She remembers my surgery. And I'm like, she delivers a ton of babies, okay? Yeah. And like, one of our good friends works at this OBGYN, and we were having dinner, and she explains to me, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but Zoe actually was, like, her delivery was miraculous. I'm like, what do you mean? Like I mentioned before, her heart had stopped and dropped very low. And then my friend tells me, hey, like, I don't think you realize, but the favor of God was over Zoe that day. I'm like, sure. Okay. Yeah, I can acknowledge that. She's like, no, like, listen, like if Zoe was delivered today, our OB/GYN office that we attend, I guess you guys go there too. Yeah. Like majority, I guess now, midwives deliver the babies. And in that emergency situation, if Dr. Natu had not been there, she said, yeah, I don't know. We would have called the on-call doctor, but I don't know how fast it would have been. She also said if I hadn't gotten the epidural when I had, it would have taken more time to give me the epidural and the anesthesia that I needed to have the C-section. Yeah. So it actually shaved a lot of time off for them to get Zoe out. And so like she was like, and Dr. Natu is one of a very highly respected doctor in her field, to do that kind of surgery that quickly, that efficiently. Yeah. it was God. And I was like, oh my gosh, but for me that was like super traumatizing, all of it.
I remember asking David, like when you guys were like
yeah.
kind of out and about again, like normal questions. Oh, how was the birth? And I remember David like saying, I literally, I thought I was going home with just 2 babies that day. I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
But then I don't even think he really understood everything that was going on.
He
It's just
didn't, yeah.
like all the chaos and like, yeah, man, I can kind of like relate. I mean, just because I've seen my wife give birth too, but wow, I mean, it must have been traumatizing for David as well.
Yeah, I mean, he told me he was okay. So like there were, after you have a C-section, they have to sew you back up, and so he had already come out with Zoe, and so he was waiting for me to come out, and for me it wasn't that long, honestly, because I remember, but he said for him, he had been waiting a long time for me to come out, and then what the kicker was that same doctor came out because she wasn't there to like sew me up. She had come out and she looked at David and she said, is Blair not out yet? And then he said no, and then I guess that is when he started to panic a little,
Right.
like kind of like start imagining what he's gonna do if I'm not there, and
Because
then
like even the doctor expects you're out by now,
Right.
but if you're not, then something must have gone wrong.
right, and so she even said, oh, let me go check on her, and so so that's what it was. Really.
Gosh,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
Okay, but sorry, I know this is like turning into something else, this
No, no, no.
conversation, but
No.
but so I think just the trauma of that too, and then as you know, going from 1 to 2 children is a big change.
Like dads can't slack off anymore.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. No, dads don't slack off, but and physically after C-section was a lot tougher for me. I was better physically, quicker, like I was okay, but then like the after effects, like maybe a couple weeks down the road, was a lot more challenging. Like I needed pain medication to manage what I was feeling physically. And then like at the end of the day, after, what doesn't seem like a lot, but is actually a lot and feels like a lot, but then you feel like you can't admit that it was a lot. And then the residual effects of that coming out at the end of the day when you're exhausted. And unfortunately for me, it was like in my marriage or in my relationships, right? Like with friends even, was just like difficult, like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't like this. I mean, I'm not even going to like spiritually, like, I didn't want to read the Bible. I wanted to just sit and vegetate, and then all of a sudden there's times where you feel guilty about that, and then it's like, what do? You can't even relax comfortably. And again, not everyone is me. My personality is just like that. I just don't feel myself if I'm not being proactive in something, right? And so all of that combined, just soldiering through. Meeting up with friends. I would even say meeting up with you and Shirley. Just playing the part.
Right.
I had fun. It was fine. Like people like, oh, how are you? I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm not great. I'm not good. But I don't say that, After Zoe reached about a year, is when the pandemic hit. Yeah. And then it was crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then I was home all alone again, thankfully, work from home was a big shift too. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to make like 3 lunches, you know, instead of just, you know, myself and the kids. And it was it's fine. You know, we all survived. And actually, the pandemic, thankfully for my family, was a huge blessing. A lot of very positive things came out of it. We got to spend time together that we normally wouldn't have, mostly because, honestly, because there was no physical ministry demands where we had to be present at church in the physical building, right? Where a lot of my time and David's time is required. So because of that, we were forced to spend family time together, which we always wanted, but now it was like possible. So it was very good in that way. However, you know, it was a different, I mean, literally the world shut down. And so in that, yes, I started the podcast during that time, in 2020, and it was twofold, right? Like it was because it worked out, right? But then for me, it really was me trying to find purpose again, and also like trying to get myself out of whatever it is I was in, right? And it helped a lot. It helped a lot.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, like talking with people, sharing life with people, and then, you know, people responding to it, and it gave me a lot of life. But I realized, you know, there were still nights that I was exhausted, and people were still willing to meet with me in the evenings. But even though I was exhausted at night, I still really liked it. I loved it. And so I knew that this was something that I wanted to keep doing. But again, even in that, people would still ask me how I'm doing. I'm fine.
So then, like, what would, because, I mean, again, I think it's understandable, because it just from like Zoe's pregnancy to the birth and everything that happened afterwards, it just sounds like compounding trauma, right? Like one after the other. And I'm sure you're still going through the purposelessness feeling. Yeah. And
no, I was going to say, like, what you just said, like everything compounding together, and then like you don't have time to think about it. Like it's just like one thing after the other. You're cooking, you're cleaning, if they're napping, you're trying to finish the laundry, and then like say they have sleep regression, then it's like, okay, everything gets pushed back, and then so many things. Like I don't have a complete thought. I can't even sit and like just like be. And so I remember even a time where you were like, because we're both podcasting at this point, and you're like, hey, like let's have one like about our kids. I don't know if you remember, but I kept saying no. It's because like at the time I had nothing good to say. It was just complaining. Yeah, like I didn't want people to misunderstand. Right. And then I even told you, like, I was like, David, if I come on and we talk about our kids, it's just gonna sound like me complaining the whole time. And I remember you saying like, yeah, well, it's okay, like that's what it is, right? I'm like, no, like, because it was almost like the complaining wasn't out of love. It was out of like, I was pissed. I was angry, like I was frustrated, like, and
but you know, I think even that's like normal. Like I can't think of any parent who are like, I only complain out of love for my kids. No, like there are days where it's just like you tell your kid 100 times, don't run around with that cup, you're gonna drop it and it's gonna make a mess and I'm gonna have to clean it up. They do it again anyways. And it's like you're not like, they're like, oh, out of love I have to discipline my child. You're just pissed off, right? So that's like natural human reaction. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. But I didn't want to come on a podcast and like show the world how mad I was, right? But now I'm like, yeah, like I feel good, like talking about it, because I understand now that like that's just a season that people go through, but when you're in the midst of it, you don't realize that it's just a season, right? And I will say what's contributed to the shift is it is because my kids are older now. You know, like it's different. Things are different. My kids go to school, and not every day, but Zoe's still in preschool, but it's completely different than it was. You know, they play together. I don't have to. I mean, the problems and issues are much different now, but yeah.
So, you know how you said that once you realized that you were going through it, kind of immediately you were out of it?
Yeah.
So, how would you describe the difference? So, let's say that, like having this conversation right now, right? How was it different when we were having a different conversation while you were still kind of in the midst of it?
I probably wouldn't want to talk about it, right? Right now, as I'm like having this conversation with you, like it's because I enjoy it, right? I think before, okay, so okay, let's just be real again. As a church staff, right? Like there's obligation, okay? But, and I can do it. I can do the obligations. And I can get through them. And honestly, I bet people would be surprised to know that like I was just getting through it. But now I like want to actually know how you're doing, right? It's like, oh, how are you doing today? Oh, good. Okay, that's great. Oh, and I'm just listening. It's fine. But right now, like I'm completely engaged. But I will say again, as I'm talking, I'm realizing too, like it's because my attention is not as divided as it used to be, right? Like as my kids are older, they don't need me entirely, right? And I can be myself again. But looking back on everything, because I was thinking about this before talking to you, like, oh, is there something I would have done differently? Or is there something I wish I had done differently? Yes. Do I have control over what happened? No. But like, I think if I had just let go, you know, and not been so worried, or which is a lot. It's like hard to let that go, right? Because they're your children. I feel like I would have enjoyed it more. Am I talking like in code? I can't tell.
No. I feel like I can totally relate. I don't know if it's because I'm a father or not.
Right, it could be.
Yeah.
I feel like I could be. So, okay, what I'm saying, let me clarify a little bit. When you have kids, it is actually very terrifying. Like, you're responsible for everything they do. They need you for everything. You know, like, they cannot do anything without you. And the responsibility that I feel is like how they turn out in life is going to be directly because of how I have impacted, influenced parents, whatever, them, right? Like even them like falling, right? It bothers me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even like, oh, like they tripped and fell. I'm like, why did you fall? Right? And it's like not every day, but just sometimes like, oh, like why are they being so careless? Right? Just obsessing over like everything that they do. I think is natural. But I was just extreme like about it. I don't think I'm the only one.
Sure.
But if looking back again, if I could have just let some of those things go, I think it would have been okay. You know, it would have been less burdensome or less preoccupying. I guess like everything was just I was holding on to it. And I don't know if you remember, we had this conversation on the podcast about, I forget what that one was about, but we talked about our kids.
Yeah. I think I always like just drove the conversation to that for like whatever the topic was. I think it was the one where, was it the one where I was like, I'm going to try to be unfiltered?
I don't know, but you compared it to like, you compared parenting to like even Hitler having parents and stuff. Do you remember that?
Oh, oh yeah. Oh, yeah. I did talk about Hitler quite a lot back then. No, it was yeah. So the fear that I had as a father.
Oh yeah,
is,
oh yeah.
Like Hitler had parents who raised him and had direct influence over
Right.
the person he became.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like we were talking about that, but then like I remember there were definitely times where God intervened, and it was in that conversation, just like I think a couple weeks prior to us talking, like I had realized, oh, I really need to surrender my children to God, because if I don't, like, why, what's the point? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, why am I following Jesus?
Yeah.
Like, kind of thing, you know?
You know, I mentioned this on the previous episode, but during like I went to counseling for anxiety, and my counselor was like, she recognized that I was very like similar to you, like obsessed about like how I'm raising my kids and how like I need to be that provider, right? And I remember the question she asked me that still is like something I like have to remind myself is like, well, if you're trying to do all these things for your kid, like how much room are you leaving for God to be God over their lives?
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not giving God any room. Yeah. So
Yeah, exactly. And so, sorry, David, I don't know where I was going with this, but in all that, oh yes, like just letting go, right? Of, I mean, I guess this pertains to anyone's life.
Yeah.
Just letting go, like
Yeah.
of whatever it is that you feel like you have control over, I think is key. But yeah, so to answer going back to your question of like, how are things different now? I think that's one of the major things, right? It's like, I want to be with friends. I think, you know, there are many times too where I would like feel left out, right? Because of our seasons of life are different. And so I held it against people, right? Not purposefully. I think it was just like, again, this emotional, hormonal trauma that I was feeling that it contributed to maybe a passing thought, right? That would turn into more than it should be, I feel like. And I say more than it should be because I know that in a previous life of before children, this would not bother me as much as it does now, is what I'm saying. And I understand that everyone's degree of this is different. But for me, it was just like those types of things that I would hold against society, like people, like the world. And in turn, it would just make me not want to socialize at all. Okay, then it's just me, my kids, and my husband. Against that's fine.
sometimes your husband.
Right. But like, it's just like, if it's just gonna be the four of us, then that's just how I don't need anybody else. But that's not
Yeah.
okay. And I truly felt like that for years. And it's so interesting to me and
So-
embarrassing for me, but
Were you aware you were thinking that, or was that just kind of just something that was happening that you recognize in retrospect? Like this whole like it's our family against the world kind of mentality.
Okay. I recognize it in retrospect. I did not know I felt that way at the time. I don't, but I do want to clarify. It wasn't like it was like us against the world. It was just I wanted to isolate, right? Like I didn't, it turned into like, okay, well, if they feel that way, or if they're not gonna include or whatever it was, which wasn't true. Okay, it wasn't true. Then at least we have us.
Yeah.
Is what it was.
Right. So it's like there were instances where you feel like you were being left out, and also compounded on top of that, you went through what a lot of people would call pretty unique set of circumstances, right? That compounded with all this trauma that probably made you behave a certain way towards these people.
Right.
And is that what the confrontation was about?
Yes. Yes. Along with other things. But yes.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a hard question. Are you thankful that these people confronted you?
Oh my gosh, David. Am I thankful they confronted me?
Because I don't know if this is true or not, but from just what I'm hearing, it sounds like that confrontation kind of allowed you space and reason to think back and kind of organize all the things that have been happening, all the thoughts that you weren't able to have because you were so busy, preoccupied, to help you realize that you were going through this thing and thus help you come out of it, right? So I don't know if it's a direct causal effect of the confrontation led to you like kind of getting over postpartum depression or not, but it at least seems correlated, right? So I don't know if you can say that you would be in the place that you are now without that confrontation. You might be able to, but I don't know. It's from this conversation, it's not clear to me that could have happened without the confrontation. You know what I mean?
No, I get what you mean. No, yeah. I do think that 2022 year had to happen. And I had to go through it. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know if I'm thankful, but like
Right. No, yeah.
But I recognize that it was necessary. And I guess thankful that it happened.
You know, have you heard that like Chinese, like, I don't know, it's a proverb or like story of like a Chinese horse rancher?
No.
It's been going around on the internet, but it's basically this Chinese guy. He has like these horses. He has like 4 horses, right? And then one day there's a storm that knocks over the fences, and the 4 horses like run away. The village comes and says, "Oh, that's bad luck. Like that, this happened. The storm happened." And the guy is like, "I don't know yet." The next day, those 4 horses come back, but with 2 extra horses that they found along the way. And the village people come back again and say, "Oh, what great luck! Like there's these new horses that you got." And he said, "Oh, I don't know." And then his son is out there trying to tame these like wild horses, and in doing so, the horse like kicks him and breaks his leg. And the village people come and say, "Oh, that's terrible luck." And the guy again says, "Oh, I don't know." But then the day after, there's a war happening. Like, military comes and says, "We're going to be drafting all able-bodied young men." But his son's leg's broken, so he doesn't get drafted. So the village people come again and say, "Great luck." And he says, "Oh, I don't know yet." You know what I mean? So like in the moment, like anything can feel good or bad, but ultimately you don't really know if it was good or bad. You know? So And I think this applies to kind of your entire story
Yeah.
of like what happened with your pregnancies, like what you went through. Because like if you, who knows, right? Like, if you didn't go through the hardship, like the first year of having Eli, you might not be the mom that you are now.
Yeah.
You know, and like
Yeah.
the way that Eli and Zoe are raised, like they're such great kids, right? Like maybe that might not have happened if it weren't for the experiences that you went through. And that's all to say. I think it's helpful to be reminded of that, reminded of your story, for people who are going through hard times, right? Like, especially mothers, right? New mothers who like don't know what's going on. Like, everything's so new. Life is so different. It's nice. It's good to remember, like, you don't know what this hardship is going to lead to in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's also nice to hear that, like, there's a season, right? It wasn't the fact that you had kids that was like what's difficult. It
Right.
was the fact that you had infants,
Yes.
right? And then now that they're a little bit more self-sustaining, it's like you get freed up and you're able to, yeah, not be so distracted and preoccupied all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you learn to let go
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
surrender. Yes. Parenting is a beautiful thing. It's hard. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. And no one, if someone says it's easy, they're lying to you because, yeah. But it's so I'm really coming into understanding, the not just making sure the baby survives, right? But then like what it looks like to just live a life that is abundant for God, right? And I can do that with our children, and yeah, it's such a gift, and I really am grateful. I will admit, I'm still coming around to the idea that I should be grateful for my pregnancies and stuff.
Yeah.
Every time I get a little bit car sick, I'm like, oh, freak, hell no. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And I look at my friends that are pregnant or still want more kids, and I'm like, yes, you should. You should have. If you should have, it's a blessing. Like I know Shirley's pregnancies were not as like crazy.
Yeah.
I know that she's been sick and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
I'm like, girl, you have as many as you need to. You have as many as you need to. David, you guys are great parents. But I am just grateful again. But I am really excited, you know, for the next season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for parents who are kind of in the thick of it, I recently saw on a reel, so I forget who posted it. So sorry, I can't shout you out, but somebody posted this reel of a mother saying, every time I feel overwhelmed, like taking care of my little kids, I imagine that I am my future self who came back just to spend another day with my like little baby.
Man, I want to cry. It's so sweet. My
Yeah, so
gosh.
I mean, it's there's like a lot of just like perspective shifting, and
Yes.
but yeah, I think yeah, parenting, it's, I mean, especially for moms, but for dads too. Like as you were telling your story of how like sometimes you felt like, oh, David gets to go to work, but I'm stuck here. Like there are nights where like after dinner and stuff, like Shirley takes the kids up, like bathes them and puts them to sleep. Like and like they won't go to sleep with me, so like Shirley, it's really our only option to get the kids to go to sleep. But I'm like downstairs doing the dishes and cleaning up, like like Shirley gets to go to sleep while like I'm here like having
Yeah,
to do all
no,
this housework.
absolutely. I'm sure it feels that way.
yeah.
And
It's a very like to a much lesser degree than what I'm sure mothers feel.
no.
But but there is that too. So like I don't know. It's like I'm all that to say I can relate a little bit
Right.
to that like notion of like, oh, like the grass is greener on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's-
no, I mean like, I remember one year, we went like strawberry picking, me and the kids, and I drove like an hour and a half to get there. They loved it, but they complained the entire ride there, right? And I was like, when we finally got there, I was like, oh my gosh, like, was this even worth it? Came home, and I was like, telling David about the drive, and but then like he saw the pictures, and it was fun. It was really fun, and he said, "Oh, I wish I could go strawberry picking." And I remember feeling so guilt, like so like I'm so sorry. Like, you're right. I just wanted something to fill my day, because I didn't want to be home all day. And I'm sorry you didn't get to go strawberry picking, I'm sure I forget, moms forget, but it really is a team effort. I think about single moms almost every other day, and it is insane to me. Like,
Yeah. So, I want to ask, with this conversation, do you feel like any like you was it a positive experience sharing this story, or do you like regret it, or?
no, I don't regret it. I just feel like my thoughts were really scattered. But I hope that someone that listens to it will gain some perspective, maybe some understanding for young moms, right? Maybe you're not a parent, but maybe you think of a young mom in a certain way. I hope that you'll show them some grace
Yeah.
and understanding, and yeah, just kind of love in a way that is different than maybe what you have been doing. And then for moms that are in the midst of it, exactly, I just want to echo what David said. It's just a season, and a season that will just fly by, but I know that when you're in it, you're just trying to survive, like, and all the grandparents are like, oh, just enjoy, and you understand what they're saying, but it's different, when you're doing it. And so but you're doing a great job, Mom. You're doing a wonderful job. And yeah, I don't know if this conversation is useful or helpful. I hope it helped me, so thank you, David, to just kind of extrovert everything, and being able to like lay out my journey and understand that I too can give myself some grace in the last 6 years, has been really good. So thank you.
Awesome. And I honestly, I truly think people in any position at any stage in life can take something away from this. If you're a mother, you're doing great. Just hang in there. It'll get better. If you're a father, you're also doing great. Please show grace to your wife. She's going through something that you probably can't fully understand. But it's not that she's going crazy.
Yes.
She is going through and recovering from a lot of trauma, right? And for people who are near and around parents and mothers, please show them grace. They're going through something that you can't even begin to approach understanding. If they seem short with you, if they are unavailable, if whatever the case may be, that they're different from when they were not parents. It's obvious, like they're parents now. Their life priorities are shifting. They've gone through things that you don't know about. So yeah, and even for like the people who are like in the grocery store and they see a mom with a little bratty kid running around, it's like everyone can say, "Oh, I wouldn't raise my kid that way," but it's like you don't know.
Yeah,
You just
you have no
absolutely
idea.
have no
Yeah.
idea. So I think we can all agree. Let's show each other more grace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick story from, you said the grocery store thing. I remember Eli was big enough to be like in a carrier, and he was like facing forward, and I was grocery shopping with him strapped to me, and I was like putting groceries like on the conveyor belt to check out, and there was like a male customer behind me, and I had a lot of groceries that day, and I remember this woman from 3 aisles down stopped what she was doing and came to my aisle to help unload my grocery basket. Yeah, my cart.
Wow.
And I was like so shocked. I was so speechless, so shocked. I left, and then she just quickly helped me, and then she went back. She didn't even say anything. She didn't say anything to me. I remember just feeling so seen in that moment and thinking, oh my gosh, like, and then like there's this camaraderie with moms. Like, you see a mom open the van door and like 3 kids come out, and you look at them and you're just kind of like, yeah, I see you, you know. And so yeah, truly, it's a wonderful thing to be a mom, and we see you, yeah.
Oh wow. That went much longer than I thought it would.
So
No,
sorry.
but it was all so good. So I'm glad we got to have this conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything you kind of wanted to add or
No, but if you ever want to talk, I am always willing to listen. So
And she has her own podcast. I would be remiss if I did not plug that.
shameless plug.
Yeah, the When I Grow Up podcast. And I think hearers, you can appreciate it more knowing kind of the mindset that she was in when she birthed it, right? So I think, yeah, we can all appreciate the When I Grow Up podcast more.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Blair, for, yeah, just really, honestly, just the boldness. And I feel like there's a negative connotation to that, but truly, like, being bold enough to share something so vulnerable, personal, and, yeah, so traumatic, I guess. Yeah, because I keep thinking, all I can relate to is the word trauma for like all the stuff I heard. So thank you for sharing all that. I know it's not easy, but I truly believe that people who are going through it can hear and be inspired. So yeah, thank you guys again for listening. Thank you, Blair, for being here, and we'll talk to you guys next time.